Well, for more on the general political developments in Somalia, we're now joined by Ebrahim Deen, who's a researcher at the Afro-Middle East Centre. Very good evening to you, Ebrahim. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
All right. What are the chances of these elections actually taking place?
You know, there was an agreement that was signed between the different regions in May and then again in June, which was supposed to have, the election was supposed to happen in July and August. It did not happen. The other presidential candidates under the coalition of the CBS coalition also said that they don't agree with the agreement that was signed because it gives too much powers to the regions. So it seems as if that if there is an election, and it currently seems, very. I mean, the election is supposed to be tomorrow or Friday in the last call, and then got pushed to October. So it's very difficult to see it actually happening unless it's forced to happen. Farmajo seems as if he's going to lose power in this election and will likely want to delay it as much as he can.
So what's the beef between him and Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble?
The big issue is around security and intelligence appointments. Now, Farmajo relinquished or relented in April when he wanted to extend his mandate. And he relented under much pressure. And ever since then, there's been a lot of pressure between him and Roble, who is supposed to now organize the election. And Roble is actually now negotiating, with the different regions for the electoral process, which Farmajo doesn't want. He wants a one-man, one-vote system because he thinks it will favor him. Whereas Roble, is not running and is looking at the federalist system. And I think it's probably at the moment the only way you can sort the situation out is to have the indirect election that everyone talks about. Now, a key cog in organizing the elections is security apparatus, especially in a place where there's currently a civil war, basically. There had been an assassination of a female security operative that was not investigated properly. So Farmajo then, Roble then wanted to remove the official because they blamed it on the Shabab, and the Shabab actually issued a statement denying it. So you could see there's internal factional politics at play there. The big beef is about this election. There is going to be the attempt by Farmajo to actually steer or engineer a system where he would, win the vote. Roble, is not necessarily in favor of that.
What will these elections mean, especially against the backdrop of how much of Somalia does the government actually even control?
There's two things here. One is how much does it control? Two is the issue about, the state or the center versus the periphery. So what do they control? Three is the fact that Emerson is moving out in 2021. So the bigger issues in the country needs to be the development of a new constitution. We have to start off with delineating the power between the regions and the peripheries. That's probably a good first step, but unfortunately, the sequencing doesn't seem to be there. And also, Farmajo wants to centralize power, which is angering the regions even further. So, an only option is to try and actually first have a constitution, delineate clearly the powers of the regions vis-a-vis the center, and then have an election. Because failing which, they kind of just fighting over a small piece of Mogadishu, because even in the regions, the regional powers already control their own regions and they have their own military apparatus, which is unlikely to change. Despite any results in the election. So, it's more just Farmajo wanting now to extend his mandate, and this is probably the only way he can do so.
If Farmajo is on his way out, as conventional wisdom might suggest, is there a clear path for would-be successors, and who are they?
So Hassan Khair, who was the previous Prime Minister running now, seems a very likely candidate. He has, in Somalia, and as you were mentioning earlier with the female candidates, I think it's big that she's running in the society, and the fact that there's no real opposition, which is amazing and refreshing and very progressive. But to actually win an election in the Somali system, especially in this indirect system and clan-based system, you also need to be able to negotiate and have power within the tribes. And the tribe that has the prime ministership won't necessarily have the presidency. It generally rotates between the four big tribes. And so, Hassan Ali Khair seems as if he has the tribal support, and he also has, support from Turkey. Qatar is also quite close to him. And so he seems currently in pole position to win. But then there are also former candidates, former prime ministers and presidents, such as Sheikh Sharif and Mohammed Sharif as well, who are supported by the Saudi UAE coalition, and also do have big backing within their peripheral or regions, their centers of power. So it does seem as if it will be competitive. But then again, in the election, it's not really a process of the best man wins. It's who can, in a sense, garner the most support from the tribes and be able to actually negotiate tribal coalitions.
Are you optimistic? Let's say that the elections do happen, and let's say a strong candidate wins, that person can actually move the country forward? Or there's just so many unknown elements that could scupper any initiatives?
It just seems as if, we're all looking at this election, and we're not talking about the two big elephants in the room. One is the Shabab. Yeah. And they're not going anywhere. And, none of these candidates seem to hold out the prospect of negotiations. That's a big issue. And that's, going to hamstring them even further. I mean, we're just following Afghanistan so closely and seeing what happened. And two is the regional influences, your Qatar, your Turkey, your Kenya, your Ethiopia. But now, especially your Kenya in today's times with the whole Jubaland issue and the fact that they're supporting a militia group within Somalia. So those are two issues that need to be dealt with for, even the starting of a solution if a person wins an election. And it doesn't seem likely that any one of them have the will or the power to actually do anything about it.
So what about Fawzia Yusuf Adam? Is this a serious candidacy or one that is good to talk about and perhaps might bring some issues up for discussion?
I think it's more good to talk about. I mean, the fact, and as I said earlier, the fact that there's no opposition is very refreshing, and it kind of shows how far we have moved forward as a continent. There isn't much opposition because of agenda. Now, I mean, maybe it's because most of us know she doesn't have much of a chance. But also it's maybe because the society doesn't have so much of an issue as we may have perceived they have had. And that's a big thing, that there is a candidate running who's a female. But, in terms of actual winning an election, I mean, her best bet is probably to partner with the coalition and get a similar position, a ministerial position in the next government. I mean, she was a previous foreign minister, so she did have quite a bit of influence in that sense previously as well.
All right. Now, I don't know if Shabab has talked about it, but they certainly would not be happy with a woman leading the country. They wouldn't be happy with anyone, actually, from the current crop, I guess, but more so a woman.
I would, based on the ideology and the leanings, it doesn't seem as if they will be happy, yes. But, I mean, then again, they are as critical of the whole electoral process. And I mean, I think, negotiations may lead to a more moderate Shabab that may, work a bit more with the political system. I mean, we all have to remember that Shabab was before the youth wing of the Islamic Courts Union. And was under many of these candidates before, before the Ethiopians and the Americans came in, and actually Shabab became a lot more radical. So, there's a possibility of it moving back into the system if the proper, carrots and sticks are used, but more carrots than sticks, as we see the 602. But, they are very unlikely to support a woman candidate, specifically in such a high office. ideologically, it doesn't seem as if, they have changed. They've evolved to that level. They've evolved to a level of more local struggles, but not necessarily as progressive on gender rights.
You pointed to the AMISOM withdrawal. Is that going to be similar to Afghanistan, where without their presence, quite literally, all hell will break loose?
I think there's one difference. One key difference is the fact that, there are Kenyan troops in Jubaland. There's Ethiopians who have very big influence and very big interest in the Ogaden region. And these regional powers, because they have interest in Somalia, aren't likely to allow it to go to a situation where Shabab just overruns the government. But also, many of the regions, the 8 different regions, have their own militia groupings and forces, which, unlike in the Afghanistan case, actually seem to be able to perform and have some capacity. So, it will be more civil war, and maybe Shabab would win out over a longer period of time. But it's not going to, at least it's very unlikely that it will just be an Afghan situation or solution where, basically the army folded and Shabab was just able to, gain control of everything so easily.
All right, and perhaps to end where we started, at this election, if it does happen, will it be free and fair? And I'll use those words because that's what we use in terms of elections. But this is a special case in many ways.
It's a very special case. By the fact that they're telling you it's an indirect election, already tells you a bit about the freeness and the fairness of the election. And the fact that all these different power centers have their own security forces and apparatus. It's very unlikely that it will be free and fair, but it's also very unlikely that, as we saw in April, it's very unlikely that the different centers will fight each other and there'll be a civil war between these different factions, mainly because they all benefit from the system, and a redefined, rejig system will actually be worse for them. So they all, want their own small parts of the system.
Do we know what the ordinary Somalis want? Peace and what else?
They in the early years of Farmajo, there was development. The economy grew, education rates, and I think Somalis generally just want a situation where they can actually live. I would be willing to tolerate any solution that would allow them to do that. So it doesn't, democracy is not necessarily what they may want. They would want peace. And then afterwards look towards democracy. So whichever solution allows them to actually live their lives a bit more and improve their conditions would be, from what I've heard from the Somalis I've spoken to, and obviously it's a smaller sample size, it's a solution that would allow for growth and allow for peace and allow for reconciliation.
Ebrahim Deen, thanks very much indeed. Always good talking to you. Your insights greatly appreciated. Thank you.